Hi, my name is Ashley Ann Razo, and I will be presenting the film Evan Almighty. I chose this film, Evan Almighty, because it depicts a great modern-day contemporary way of how God saves Noah in the book of Genesis and in the Quran, in both Christianity and Judaism. The film Evan Almighty was released the year of 2007. It was directed by Tom Shadyac and written by Steve Okereke, who wrote the screenplay, and by Joel Cohen and Alec Sokolow, who wrote the story. A very popular film that starred Steve Carell, who played the character Evan Baxter, and Morgan Freeman, who played God. To give a little background information, it focuses on the life of Evan Baxter, a newly elected congressman living in a suburban home in Northern Virginia. He started his congressman job with a congressional campaign that focuses on changing the world. After just a few days in Congress, strange things started to happen to him. For example, his alarm would go off at 6:14 a.m. every day, and the number 614 would appear everywhere. And weirdly enough, animals would follow him for no reason. Lastly, he purchased the 8 vacant lots in his neighborhood under his own name. God then appeared to him in his car and instructed him to build an ark to prepare for a flood that will be coming September 22 midday. He finally then realized that the 614 he's been seeing everywhere referred back to the book of Genesis. Evan was then removed from the Congress bill he was co-signing in and began to build the ark despite of what people were saying. When September 22 came, he loaded hundreds of animals and awaited a flood. That only turned out to be a flood due to a poor construction of a dam nearby that destroyed his house and his neighborhood. When all the water swelled away, God appeared to him one last time and told him he had fulfilled his campaign of changing the world by building the ark, which they called one act of random kindness. Noah's Ark is a famous biblical story. But what do people really think when they hear Noah's Ark? People only have a generalization that it is an ark built by Noah that saved all animals in a flood. But when they say this, they have no reason why, how, or what happened. Now we will take a closer look on how the film closely resembles the Bible and the Quran in Christianity and Judaism. In Christianity, Noah's Ark is seen in Genesis story. In the Genesis story, God advises Noah to build an ark to save himself, his family, and every animal. God advises Noah to do this because he notices that mankind has become corrupt and violent while moving their worship away from him. Therefore, God had a plan for a catastrophic flood that would destroy every living thing on earth as a punishment. Rain then fell for 40 days and 40 nights, while the flood lasted for 150 long days. After this 150 long days, God directed them toward land. After a year, God finally invited Noah out of the ark, and Noah immediately built an altar and worshipped the Lord with burnt offerings from the clean animals. From this, God was finally pleased and promised to never destroy all living creatures as he had just done. After closely analyzing the film Evan Almighty and Noah's Ark in the Genesis story, it is evident that they have both similarities and differences. They are similar in both stories in a sense where God advises Evan and Noah to build an ark. The purposes of both arks were some sort of change. The differences in both were the duration of the flood. In Evan Almighty, the flood only lasted 1 day, while in Genesis story it lasted 150 days. The causes of the flood for Evan Almighty was caused by a nearby dam damage, in comparison to God creating this catastrophic flood to punish mankind. Another difference is that there was rain in Genesis story and no rain in the film. And lastly, God does not tell Noah the exact day of the flood in the Genesis story. Noah's Ark story begins with Noah advising those around him to reform to the one God. When Noah is ignored and gives advice for a better and practical way of life for his people, he continues to warn them of a punishment if they do not follow. As he is rejected again, Noah turns to God for help when he is disobeyed. From there, Noah then constructs an ark with God's guidance while his local chiefs and everybody around him ridiculed him. Furthermore, God then flooded the earth to diminish them for all the wrongdoing as a punishment. Comparing both the film and Judaism, there are no similarities, besides the little fact that both arks were made for a change. The differences that played a part between those two were the duration of the flood, the causes of the flood, and how Noah seeks God for help when his people are obeying him in the Quran, and how Evan seeks God for help to help him with his campaign in the film. After analyzing the film Evan Almighty, the Genesis story in Christianity, and the Judaism story in the Quran, it is evident that Evan Almighty should not be taken as a literal translation of Noah's Ark. It is merely a simple modern-day interpretation. Therefore, it is not a reliable source to use this film to give you an insight about the biblical story of Noah's Ark. In conclusion, the director and writer's purpose in creating this film is purely for entertainment. This is evident when we compare both biblical accounts to the film and found minimal similarities. They use a biblical story as a method in attracting their desired crowd, which are children, adults, and simply just religious people.